Recording in progress.
Good morning. The November 15th, 2022 meeting of the Charter Authorizing Panel is called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Department of Ed and ask that you please silence all of your electronic devices. Happy holidays, friends. Next week's Thanksgiving. It's here before we know it. Just as a quick reminder, we will have 2 days in December to look through renewals. So hopefully you've got those 2 days marked on your calendar, and I know Dory will try to get that agenda up as quickly as possible. So today, as we're looking through our agenda, we will start with our consent agenda. Ms. Summons has updated the minutes with the most current revised version. If you've not looked at those, take a moment to look at those. I have a motion. Second. All right. I have a motion by Ms. Wright McMurray and a second by Ms. Saraceni to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Did we hear from our, give me a thumbs up or something up there, Ms. Newton and Mr. Davis?
Aye. Can you hear me?
Thank you. All right, motion carries. With our action agenda today, we will be reviewing our charters. This is an opportunity that we take each year. We've just released our School Index. This gives you an opportunity to look over all of the charters, and we've done it different ways in the past, but what we hope to accomplish today is that we can hear from the charter panel the questions that you might ask the charter office to go and investigate, instead of dragging all the schools up to make reports that maybe we send our office of charter out to them to put together the reports and bring those in, and then use our time with the schools that need us the most. So Ms. Tiffany Grayer is our coordinator of school performance, and I've asked Tiffany to put together a very short presentation about charters and about our School Index. So Ms. Grayer.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman, for having me here today. So the Office of School Performance and I'm sorry. The Office of Public School Accountability's School Performance Unit puts out a series of nested reports. The two of those just recently released to the public just last week. Our public school rating, which is our accountability at a glance report, just came out for the first time since 2019, which included our letter grades. Those came out, as well as our School Index. So our accountability at a glance report, our school ratings, that's our state accountability system, whereas our School Index is our federal accountability system. So both of those reports were just recently released this November. In just a few weeks, we will be sending out notification letters to districts regarding their state and federal accountability statuses, as well as their participation statuses. In December, we will put out our school report card, or at least the first version of that, which will include much broader data about the school. The school report card includes 18 modules. The full school report card will be out by April 15th of 2023. There is some lagging data that comes in through cycle 5, so we do have 2 versions that we put out of our school report card. The School Index includes multiple measures, robust indicators which include achievement, growth, graduation rates, and school quality and student success components. The main focus of the ESSA School Index is achievement and growth. The stakeholders stress the importance of growth, and so it was weighted at 50% at the elementary and middle school levels. Here we see the different weights of the different ESSA School Index calculations. The weighted achievement is 35% regardless of the grade span of the school. The SQSS is 15% regardless of the grade span of the school. The growth varies, as I've already said, it's 50% at middle school and elementary. It's 35% at the high school, and then we have the graduation rate indicator coming in 10% for 4-year, 5% for the 5th year at the high school grade span. Here we see the overall ESSA School Index state averages. This gives you some trend data to look at. In 2018, you see the breakdown for the different grade spans and how that was starting to progress in 2019, and we see the impact of the pandemic. We did not have test scores in 2020, which you see that skipped year here. But we do see that in 2022, we are starting to see some rebounding from the effects of that pandemic in our scores, although we are not back to where we were pre-pandemic. We do put out a Schools on the Move report in our Office of School Performance every year, but I wanted to put out a special report for our both our open enrollment and our district conversion charter schools. So this is a little bit personalized just for them. The full report can be seen on the School Performance website, but this is targeted for the open enrollment and district conversion charter schools. So we saw 45 of those open enrollment and district conversion charter schools improve their overall ESSA School Index score from 2021 to 2022. And 7 of those open enrollment and district conversion charter schools actually increased their overall ESSA School Index score by 5 or more points. Let me read some statistics here. Cave City High Career and College Preparatory School in Cave City School District, they actually increased their overall ESSA School Index score by 5.17 points. So these Cave City Career and Collegiate Preparatory was recognized as a 2022 School on the Move Towards Excellence. So congratulations to them. Minor Academy, Bauxite School District, was recognized for both overall ESSA School Index and weighted achievement. They had an overall ESSA School Index improvement of 6.22 points and a weighted achievement increase of 10.09 points. So congratulations to Minor Academy of Bauxite School District. Next, we have Future School of Fort Smith in Future School of Fort Smith School District. They had 5.99 points of increase in their overall ESSA School Index, as well as 17.7 points of increase in their weighted achievement score for 2021 to 2022. So congratulations to Future School of Fort Smith. Next, just to let you know a little bit more about weighted achievement measures what each student knows and is able to do in both English language arts and mathematics. So these are the state averages of the weighted achievement scores by grade span. Just like we saw with our overall ESSA School Index scores, well, actually, the weighted achievement was declining a little bit, but it did take a hit in that 2021 school year. We are seeing the effects of the pandemic, but weighted achievement, especially if you look in that elementary bar, has actually increased quite a bit this year and is actually back kind of where we were pre-pandemic. So weighted achievement is doing pretty good for 2022. We do have some schools that we'd like to recognize for their increases in weighted achievement this year. 58 open enrollment and district conversion charter schools showed an increase in their weighted achievement score this year, and we had 6 open enrollment and district conversion charter schools that increased their weighted achievement score by 10 or more points, one of them being elementary, 2 middle school, and 3 high school. Friendship Aspire Elementary Academy of Little Rock and Friendship Aspire School District increased their overall ESSA School Index score by 9.01 points, and they had a weighted achievement increase score, guys, 23.83 points. That is to be, acknowledged right there. So congratulations to Friendship Aspire Elementary Academy of Little Rock. Next, we have KIPP Delta Collegiate Preparatory of KIPP Delta School District. They had an overall ESSA index of increase of 7.47 points and a weighted achievement increase of 12.93 points. So way to go, KIPP Delta College Preparatory School. Next, we have value-added growth. Value-added growth is a measure of a student's progress over time. We're looking at a student's prior year scores and making a prediction of where they're going to score in the current year based on those previous year scores. And so here is a picture of where growth is at the state level. And as you can see, growth is one of those scores that is remaining relatively stable, which, growth kind of throws out all of those biases such as poverty, a student's background, things of that nature. So you would think that this score would remain relatively stable. So we do recognize schools on the move. This is the only recognition that's not comparative from year to year. We're looking at schools that's gross score falls outside the range of normal. So schools that score 2 standard deviations above the average are recognized for exceptional growth. So we had one open enrollment district or district conversion charter school, middle school, that scored 84.71 or better, and 2 open enrollment or district conversion charter schools that scored 83.85 or better for growth. And those schools are East Village Junior Public High School, or public charter school, was one of those. They also had some other recognitions. They had a recognition for overall ESSA School Index increase of 7.74 points. They had a weighted achievement increase for 10.73 points, and they had a value-added growth score of 86.14 points. This district also had Eastham Junior High Public Charter School recognized for their overall ESSA index of increase of 5.15 points. That was Eastham School District. We also have recognitions for growth for Haas Hall Academy School District. Haas Hall Academy at the Lane had a value-added growth score of 84.43 points, and Haas Hall Bentonville had a value-added growth score of 85.84 points. So those are our 2022 Schools on the Move recognitions for open enrollment and district conversion charters. So congratulations to all of those schools for the exceptional growth that their students are making from 2021 to 2022. Oh, we have one more, I'm sorry, based on school ratings. So those are all from 2021 to 2022. These next ones will be comparing actually from 2019 to 2022 because that's the length of time it's been since we've had letter grades. So our school rating, you know, is a letter grade that has been transformed from our ESSA School Index score. And then we also, on this report, we also break down the ESSA School Index for each of our reporting subgroups. And this
I have a question.
Yes.
Can I ask a question before you move on to the
Absolutely.
letter grades? In the what we would consider the community of charters, whether they be conversion or whether they be other charters, and how are lessons learned being shared for those schools that so is there a community approach to sharing information or best practices, or for someone, not necessarily one school to tell another, but for the State Department to be able to say, these are some things that are happening in this area that seem to help in this way. So I think that's the whole point of charters, to be able to share lessons learned and be able to have a broader application of techniques. So is that something that happens?
Ms. Newton, last Wednesday, we had an open public meeting, an accountability report to the public, and it was live streamed. It's been recorded. We can send you that recording as well. But it was an opportunity for principals and superintendents to come and talk about what they've been doing. And some of the schools that were featured on Schools on the Move were there to talk about the things that they were doing. Some talked about PLCs, they talked about the real differentiation, the focused attention they were providing to each student. Some of them talked about just the questions they were asking themselves about where they're going in the future in their school improvement plans. They're looking at their calendars. They've been looking at how they collect and report data. It was really a great conversation, but to your point, that was one of the ways that the communities have come together to share. And then I know our co-ops bring in schools, and they've been having conversations because they've been asking Ms. Greer to come out and do presentations for them.
Also, this report has been going on for several years, and we interview the schools, the featured schools every year, and we do a write-up on those schools that of the superintendents and principals that we interview, and that's available on the Schools on the Move website.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So, the last recognition that we do is for letter grade increases from 2019 to 2022. We had 50 schools in the state of Arkansas that improved their letter grade in that span of time, and one district conversion charter school, or actually one charter school improved from a C to a B. Here's our statewide ratings by grade span. As you can see, we have our elementary, middle, and our high school grade spans here to show you kind of what our A to F breakdown looks like. And here is our one school that moved from C to B was Cross County High, a new tech school in Cross County School District. That was our one school that made a letter grade increase this year. So congratulations to that school. And like I said, the full Schools on the Move report can be found on the school performance webpage under Public School Accountability. So please go check out that report. Watch the report to the public that we sent out was last Wednesday if you want to hear the interviews from those principals and superintendents. So thank you for your time. Here's my contact information if you have any questions about anything ESSA.
Thank you, Ms. Greer. Ms. Wright McMurray, any questions for Ms. Greer?
trying to think how to get my question together. So, I'm trying to think back to the slide that you shared where you showed quite a bit of growth for elementary schools. Do you mind to go back to that one so I can?
I think it was the weighted achievement slide. This one.
Mm-hmm. So after I saw that, and I started going back through some of my other notes and looking at some of the letter grades for our elementary charters and trying to get a sense of the ones that aren't doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a little bit more detail or help me better understand how does this reflect in what we're seeing here in some of the elementary schools that did not do very well and are either still at D's or F's or declined to a D or F? I'm not quite asking that, but I'm just trying to see how does that translate into that.
Sure.
So, first of all, these are state averages.
Yes.
So you're taking in all 1,000 plus schools into these averages, and you're looking at a very small number here. I think each charter would tell you probably a different story of what's going on. We saw a lot of, during the pandemic, we saw kids moving around from school to school. You know, we heard many of our virtual schools come in and make tremendous increases in their enrollment cap. And they've experienced unusual circumstances from people signing their kids up for a virtual school and not really knowing what a virtual school was. So I think there has been a lot of movement of kids. I think there have been kids sign up for virtual learning that really didn't have maybe the background support for virtual learning. I think we've talked to many of the charter schools this year that, you know, we're back to on-site instruction and the kids are not coming every day. So we see our attendance data showing that kids are not participating every day. And you know, when they're not participating every day, then they may not be learning every day. So I think it's varied by school. Would you agree?
Yes.
And that's kind of the gist of what we've heard.
Because what we haven't seen are other measures in ESSA that have gone down in the pandemic, even though this one has gone up. And so that, you know, even though the weights are not the same. And this one isn't, you know, it's back up in elementary, but it's down in middle school, high school, and like she's saying, these are just state averages, so that even though it may be higher for some, it's going to be lower for others. So
I think what initially caught my attention, and even when I was looking at these.
So what you would really want to look at would be the overall average, and not just one indicator.
Yeah. So I guess
because that's what's going to determine how many A to F you have, is the overall. And so if you look at the overall index, you can see that that overall average is still not where it was the last time we had letter grades, right? Which is going to pull that scale down.
So I guess what triggered the question first for me, and then I just started going through the rest of the list. So I was just looking at Academic Plus. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at their like their other elementary and their high school, you know, they're still doing pretty good there. But then when you look at the Scott Elementary School, it's a D. So I was just trying to figure out if they're in the same area, and that was I'm guessing Scott is a traditional campus. Trying to get my mind wrapped around as we're looking at who do we need to have to come in and to talk and to provide a little bit more detail. What are some of the things we need to be kind of looking at or helping the charter team to be able to ask those questions for us? Because when I was looking at that yesterday and I think last week, that was jumped out at me. It's like, okay, this is Maumelle academic plus, they're doing well over here, but over here, you know, they're not doing as well. And then when I saw that, so even looking at this, they're doing well at their high school, but the high school numbers are lower, so they're figuring it out there, but for some reason they're having the challenge of figuring out for the elementary students that seem to be doing better than even the middle and the high school, according to all the charts that were showed there. So I was just trying to kind of get my mind wrapped around that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very specific to that to that school. That's a great question.
Theoretically, what should help is the more you see an upward trend in your achievement, the more it should pull your growth, right? So, and that's going to help a lot in your elementary since that's counting for 50%. So you want to see repetitive increase, right?
And really to know more, you'd have to pull up the ESSA school index
Yeah.
for Scott Elementary
Yeah.
and really look
And
at
see,
all of
'cause
the
and you-
indicators.
And you'd want to see it at the student level because that's where it's being calculated, where
So just
what's
looking at
happening
that
for
would be what I
each
would want more
student.
information about to get a better sense of what's going on
Yeah,
there.
this is just too bird's eye view when it's really being calculated down at the student level for each student, what's happening for each kid.
Put your microphone on.
It's looking at the 2As versus the D, and it's looking at that high view, is looking and asking the right questions. What are they doing differently?
Yeah, and that's why, as Ms. Kaufman said, when we were interviewing the the superintendents and principals of these schools that have really shown a lot of improvement, what they are doing is they're having data talks that involve the students and getting them involved in that conversation and the parents involved in that conversation, and not just having those conversations with the teachers, because it's them being accountable for their test scores and their data, because it affects them, and you know, they have to be aware of where they're at and where they need to be and how they're going to get there, to show that movement. And I think that's where you're going to really start to pay off.
I think one of the other things that I would add from that conversation last Wednesday was the schools that talked about not only they were having those data talks, but that students were really taking on ownership
Yes.
of charting their own progress.
Yes.
And, you know, Hattie's research tells us that has a high effect size in progress. So I think they're living proof that when kids really know where they are, what they are good at, what they need to work on, and they're able to monitor their own progress, they really take ownership of their own learning.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Saraceni, you have questions at this time? Mr. Baldwin?
So when you look at all the data, I guess I'm looking at what we've been handed out, and I'm trying to really analyze that. With COVID and with this period of time that was strange and awkward, it seems like there's a lot of schools that have had decreases, but there are some that held steady, a few that improved. How would you advise us to weight the trajectory of schools and the quality of the data? I mean, is this data still kind of in flux, and do we really need to wait for another year or two to really let COVID work its way out, and you know, the huge enrollment increases and maybe enrollment decreases, and I guess help me understand how to read this.
I think the data is valid and reliable, and I think that, you know, we've had great testing participation rates throughout 2021 and 2022. We've been testing at, you know, 97% statewide for 2021, and we're back to 99% for 2022, and that's really great, especially compared to the rest of the nation. And so I think we have a great accountability system here in Arkansas that we can count on. And, you know, so if we have schools that are struggling, we need to go back to our core curriculum, our core instruction, and make sure things are tight there. Make sure we have good teaching in place. It all really goes back to teaching and learning and the conversations we're just having.
Okay, so a school that's gone from a C to an F doesn't really have an excuse.
Well, I'm not saying that. Well, one of the great things that I took from the meeting the other day was I wouldn't say don't have an excuse, but let's just not have an excuse. Let's make a plan to do things better going forward.
I think one of the things to add too is our takeaway is there was expected learning loss.
Yes.
During the pandemic, and we know that because US Ed released ARP ESSER funds and set aside a requirement that each school set aside 20% to address learning loss. So it was nationally expected. Some of our schools had less or more learning loss depending on the situation for their students. You know, did they have, you know, good accessibility, good support systems? Did they come back quickly to school when school opened back up? Lots of factors that may have played into their scores. But I don't think any of our schools have looked for an excuse.
Right.
As Ms. Greger said, they've all talked about their plan of action to address the learning loss and move forward.
And we have lots of supports, you know, out there for schools looking for the plan.
Ms. Newton, questions? Mr. Davis? Questions?
This is a couple of comments more than questions. I think a little bit of the challenge with some of the presentation is this idea on one hand that you're looking across the state, but then in other instances, you're sort of drilling down into the charter world, right? And so it's almost like you're not necessarily comparing. In some instances, we're highlighting some charter work, but then we're looking across the state. So I'm not sure if like that's tracking for me. Like it might be or for example, in this slide, it might be great if there are the state averages, but also the charter averages, right? And so you can kind of see, okay, this is where the state is, and this is where our charters are in regards to weighted achievement, right? And over the course of some time. So just to, and I'm always careful because I don't want to get into this charter versus, but I think if we're going to include kind of the charter data within the overall state data, and we're a charter authorizing panel, we do want to kind of pull out and sort of see. So that's my first comment. The second comment that I have is help me wrap my mind around how I should think about some of the things that were highlighted here, but then take a look at some of the letter grade scores. So for example, Future School of Fort Smith, right? I mean, we applaud them in this presentation, but when I look at their letter grade score, it doesn't appear to have moved. It's a D. So help me understand how on one hand, I want to say, way to go. On the other hand, I want to say, but I'm not seeing that in kind of the letter grade metric. And so I don't want to give too much credit to their movement and their progress. At the same time, I do feel like there's some accountability that needs to be held there. And so we don't want to misrepresent, you know, the overall outcome. So can you talk through that for a little bit for me? And it could be a timing issue.
The purpose of the Schools on the Move report is not to necessarily highlight a letter grade, because the ESSA School Index is so much more complex than just a letter grade. And so the purpose of the report is to highlight movement. Did they make progress from year to year? And so we pick out very specific points of interest. So 5 points or more on the overall ESSA School Index, you get recognized. 10 points or more in weighted achievement, you get a recognition. 2 standard deviations or more above the mean in growth, you get a recognition. 1 letter grade or more, you get a recognition. So there's very specific criteria in our standard operating procedure for Schools on the Move. And so it's not all about a letter grade, just like ESSA School Index is not all about a letter grade. your accountability system is about so much more.
And I understand that. Now I'll stop after this comment, but I hope you can see kind of how this can create some confusion in the general public, right? This idea of sort of saying, hey, look at the great sort of letter on the move recognition we've gotten. But then when the public sort of looks at, and so I'm just trying to figure out how we can ground that, land that, do that in a way that's instructive and helpful to parents as they just sort of get these sort of recognitions and or, you know, look to letter grades to kind of indicate of quality. So,
Mr. Davis, let me add that if you're looking at the sheets that we have for the next items, you'll see that there was no letter grade in 2021. As you know, we had 2 years that were waived by our legislators. So what you don't see then is the ESSA index score for that year. And so making progress, so the index scores, the celebration of those is from last year to this year. And the letter grades are from way back in 2019 to 2022, which is quite a gap, but important to note. And the purpose of Schools on the Move from the very beginning when we started creating this, and it does make a lot more sense when the years are backed up to each other and you don't have these big gaps in time. But the purpose was to really encourage schools to keep working hard and to celebrate every little step in progress that you're making, because our kids really do deserve that. And sometimes the adults just need to be motivated to keep on going and to know that people are recognizing and they are looking and they want the very best for their students.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll stop there. I think there's something to be said about our role as a charter authorizing body and what that looks like, what Schools on the Move was designed to do for the public, not necessarily for the charter authorizing committee. The presentation that we have now, letter grades, as you sort of indicated, with the gap year, like there's a lot obviously that's happened over the last 3 to 4 years that I want to make sure we sort of ground in a way that helps us think about how to move the work forward. But I do agree that we need to applaud those institutions that are making, even if there are incremental steps. I'm just not sure if there is some real clarity around, you know, what that then means for the overall quality of the institution. But thank you for giving me the time.
I appreciate the comments, and I also appreciate how hard it is to accumulate data as an accountant, and I like the quantifiable information that you presented, and I know there's nuances to anything with numbers, but this is helpful, and it gives us a basis to have a discussion, so thank you.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate the feedback. We can always strive to improve, to do better, so.
All right, thank you, Ms. Grayer.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me here today.
And if you'll stick around in case we have more questions.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Ms. Summons, in our review of charters, you've got 2 documents for us. You want to come up and kind of present what you've provided to us?
Good morning. You will have 2 documents. The first one is the data for the open enrollment campuses. On these charts, you'll see the name of the charters. You'll see the enrollment caps, the data, the authorizing date, the dates that they expire, and each one of the campuses is listed. For some schools, we have an enrollment cap per campus, and some schools we do not. As we start bringing them in for renewals, we're going to start asking them for an enrollment per campus so we can kind of keep up with that information. You'll also see the grade levels, the enrollment for the 3rd quarter, their school letter grades from 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, there were no grades, and then 21-22. Students in need of support, and then the 21 graduation rate, the 4-year graduation rate. And this information is for both open enrollment and district conversions.
So what we hope today is to give you a chance to look at that and kind of question some of the I wonders. One thing that I will note for you, if you look at your open enrollment charter school data sheet, you'll notice that eSTEM Public Charter will come before us in December for renewal. So you might want to mark them on there. Friendship Aspire Academies of Arkansas will come for renewal. KIPP Delta, Premier High Schools of Arkansas, and ScholarMade. Those 5 open enrollment will be up for renewal in December, so we will see them. Hopefully this data will help you to think about some of the questions that you'll want to talk to them about. And then, of course, all of their ESSA School Index information is available on My School Info just by going to My School Info and typing in their name. You can pull that up. So if you'd like to start with open enrollment charters, we'll just be open for discussion. What future data would you like to hear from the charter school? What would you like for the charter office to investigate? Potential groups that if we can get out and talk to those charters and bring a report that maybe then you might want to consider whether or not you want to bring them in the spring. Mr. Baldwin?
The one that really stood out to me, and I guess what I was looking at primarily was was any decrease in grades, any downward movement, and it looks like the Jacksonville Lighthouse Academy schools, who I've always seen being a pretty solid program in the past with letter grades. It looks like their letter grades have fallen down to many in the D and F range, and I just wondered what caused that, and is there something that we can do to help? So really just a question, but it was the movement of grades on that school that kind of attracted my attention.
That's a great question. We'll submit that to them and get something in writing, and then you can look at it as a panel and decide if you need further information. Any others?
I guess I will say, similar to Mr. Baldwin, that I started looking at, okay, who had downward trends, and more so for me, who went to the D and F category, because again, we know we want to provide grace to schools that maybe fell to a C and whatnot because of, a little thing called COVID that kind of challenged many, but when we maybe were already at a D, and then we fell to the F, or we were at a D and we stayed at the D, those were the ones that kind of jumped out at me. But what I was kind of looking at a pattern, I tried to know was starring, are all of our, it seems like our virtual schools are struggling mightily, and so I'm just kind of wanting to get a sense of what's causing that for them. Have they been able to rebound since we've started to come out of COVID? Restrictions have been lifted. People are pretty much fully back engaging. Is it that maybe their students, I think you mentioned we're not returning at the rate that they should have, or just more engaging? What is that? Because this is the pattern that when I look at all those that are deemed online or virtual, they're in that D or F range, and to me that's concerning.
Good questions.
I just thought of something too. I thought Mr. Davis's point was really good about comparing the charter school average to the traditional school averages and see how we're doing as a charter program, because in theory, the charter should be doing something a little bit different and better than the traditional schools, which is why they exist. But it would be interesting to have that macro comparison, but then also to see the charter schools that may be under the average for the traditional schools in their area, and that would be good to know.
One thing I was thinking about as it relates to charters or just generally all the schools acknowledging the learning loss and what we lost during the pandemic. Is there any plan to try to recover, doing not extra homework naturally, but is there a thought being given to bringing the students up to where, if they're 10th grade now and they're not scoring as they should, where do we anticipate they'll be in 12th grade? Will they still be behind, or is that something that's conscious thought, or is that something just that'll be left up to the student and the parents or whatever? But if you're expected to know A, B, and C, and by the time you graduate, will our students be there? I knew it was a dumb question. I'm not an educator.
Well, I'm trying to make sure I get that written down correctly. So you're wanting to know how the schools are addressing learning loss? How are they accelerating the learners?
Right. That's what, because everyone acknowledges nationwide that what has happened based on what we've all gone through. So how is that so? The graduation rate might change or whatever might change, but I'm just wondering if particular attention is being given to bringing, acknowledging first of all that some learning losses occurred, but having an opportunity to recover that. Is there any? And again, I'm not an educator, so I don't know about how that's done. But it seems like, or do we accept that you're going to be like a semester behind when you graduate, as opposed to going into taking your ACT with the skills you need, but acknowledging that you're going to be minus a couple of points just based on what the nation has gone through?
Okay, great question.
It is a great question, and Chair, I would like to say maybe even take it a step further to see what they've put in place and how they've utilized their ESSER dollars on addressing the learning loss, because I think that would maybe be another comparison as we go forth looking at this, because I think not just the grades but also attendance, we need to compare and look at that as well. What's the attendance rate with the charters compared with traditional? I think that's another point too, as I just kind of am looking and thinking through my mind what I would like to see. I think we have to see the whole picture, because I think you've got to understand maybe the root cause before we can really do an analysis of what's going on and get the whole picture. Is that possible?
And I think, I'm sorry, and I think especially as it relates to testing, getting ready to go into ACT or prepping for ACT and looking at the impact. So if your scores are down, then what avenue, or what, assuming that everybody's still on the same measure nationwide and everybody's been through the same thing, what then does it mean to have a 23? Is a 19 now what a 23 was? I don't know. It's a question. It's a layman's question.
So I'm sorry, Ms. Newton, say that last sentence again, the last question again.
Well, the last sentence is to be able to look at the variance in where the percentage of gain or loss is, and look at testing to determine what the expected. Say, well, we expected based on situations that our ACTs would be down 12%, or in-year or SPIRE or whatever. Is there any balance or any mechanism to determine this is, yes, it's low, but given the circumstances, this is within average of how schools are doing basically schools are losing so many basis points, or I knew it didn't make sense. It just, I've got a question, but I can't get it out, I don't think, the way.
So I think what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what you're saying is if we go back in and look at the analysis on each of these schools, are the schools falling around the average, above the average, or way below the average? We only give a state average. We don't give a charter average.
No, and it's not necessarily a charter, but since we're talking about charters, but just to know that, it looks bad, but it's not really as bad as it looks, because based on the fact that this is the average in decline or increase during this period. And the same thing's true for those schools that are doing so much better for whatever reason. And we can say, this is exemplary or extraordinary that this is happening because based on what we've been through, this is the average of loss, or this is the average of decline in test scores. And that may or may not be something you guys measure, but I was just wondering, because given the circumstances, there's an expectation that there has been decline. And my question revolves around the fact of, given that expectation, are there additional efforts being made to regain lost ground?
So, in general, I would say that's certainly what we would expect the schools to be looking at. They would be looking at this data that just went public last Thursday morning or last Wednesday, and having those conversations with their community and updating their school improvement plans, their district support plans. But I think we'll go back and look at that and see how we might put together an analysis for the charter panel that might help you have a way to look at that as well.
Thank you.
And I know that, I'm sorry.
Ms. Wright McMurray?
I know that I mentioned it earlier when we were listening to the presentation, but going back to Academic Plus with Scott Elementary School, I'd like to get a little bit more information on
Scott,
on what's happening there, and I'm trying to figure it out in my head. And I think it's been mentioned a couple of times. So if we're looking at Scott Elementary, what would be their comparable school? So if we wanted to say, and this is just something I'm just thinking through in my head, is that Scott Elementary would be comparable to this elementary, and how are they doing against their peers that will be within their population of students they serve, demographic, and then size. I may be asking something that's way more than what, but those are just some things I often wonder about is when we're looking at the charter school and their outcomes comparable to a school that's not a charter school. How are they doing much better than their peer that is serving similar students in similar demographic?
So you're looking in the same region of like their neighboring schools?
That would be, because I want to be fair to the schools, say, okay, they're serving, similar enrollment, similar demographic of students. Are we seeing, what are their outcomes compared to their peer outcome?
So,
and I don't know if that's something that and that may be something I'm just thinking through in my head, but it is something, but if I'm looking even within their district, their Marmel Charter Elementary, they have an A, but then within that same, they have a D. So are they doing the same things for these kids here that they're doing over here? Are they using the same resources that they need to make sure that this school has an A, to make sure this school at least moves off of that D? Because they were at a D in 18-19, and they're at a D again in 21-22.
So,
and I don't know if that grade is a typo, but it says K to 10. Like the grade range.
is that correct, Mr. Sutherland? The grade range for Scott Elementary, K-10? Okay. If you'll look that up and let's just make sure. So let's kind of talk a little bit about this idea of comparability.
Because that helps me also to kind of know.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a question that, especially coming up with the schools that are coming up for renewal. I mean, we have to put together a lot of data to bring to you, but so we can start with the schools that are coming up for renewal in December and look at who are the comparable schools. And in their original application, they usually tell us, hey, I'm going to be pulling kids from these communities. So you would expect that those schools would be the comparable schools. Would you agree? Is that who you are thinking are comparable schools?
I think that helps me to better understand.
The community.
Yes, because, I don't want to compare this school to that school if they're not even serving the same type of students. Their demographics are different. If they're starting in different places, I don't want to say, okay, well, this school has an A, you should have an A also immediately. Now our hope is that we get you to those steps, but not immediately. You have to work to get there. But it's hard for me to kind of sense what's happening with that school because they're in the same area. Well,
No?
I just want to know if they're in the same district, who they're serving versus who's that school serving.
Okay.
Yeah, because sometimes, Dr. Wright McMurray, I think you're bringing up a very nuanced point, and Ms. Kaufman, you obviously you know this better than all of us here, but this idea of geography doesn't always equate to the same type of student served, right? So if you were to take Hope Academy, right, in the Bentonville area, that really focuses on kids who have dealt with a tremendous amount of trauma, they are serving a specific demographic of students that does not look like the Bentonville School District. And therefore, the geography, we can't just say, right, the geography is this. And part of the work around charters, and Ms. Newton sort of alluded to this, is this testing ground, and then two, to have a very clear vision and mission. And so sometimes that vision and mission may not be comparable to what you might find. And so, for example, if we go to the other end of the spectrum, I think you have an institution like Haas Hall Academy that's purely focused on, as much as they can be, they're very candid about college acceptance rate, right? So they're not going to have as strong a career-focused education dynamic that you might find at the Springdale School District that's looking to really serve, kids who are interested in pursuing a specific career, a workforce kind of opportunity versus a higher education opportunity, right? It's going to draw different people based upon what the mission and vision of that school is, although it's in the same geography. And that's where it gets really complicated to kind of do hey, well, what's the school up the road doing? Is it doing better than the school up the road, or worse than the school up the road, quote unquote, better or worse? Because it really is going to be dependent, and I think you're trying to bring this out, Dr. Wright McMurray, but please tell me if I'm incorrect. It really is going to be dependent upon the type of student that the school has decided to serve and focus on. As you've admitted, the last thing I'll say, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, when you look at an institution like Hope Academy and the students they're serving, right, it's, to me, a very necessary, needed, and I think they're doing an outstanding job with the students that they're serving. If you were to look at the report, which I actually like the report a lot, but if you were to look at the report, and you start looking at students in need of services, their letter grades, it's not the best. So all of those things have to be taken in consideration as we sort of have this conversation.
What he said. What he said.
Oh, what he said. Yes, Mr. Davis, that's exactly.
So that's what I was trying to get to, is that I'm seeing 2 Ds, but why am I seeing the 2 Ds? And then the other piece of it is, because we're in Academic Plus district, what are they doing at the A school versus the D school? And are they trying to just say, okay, well, this works at the A school, but is that working at the D school? You may feel like that what you're doing for your A school students is effective, but if that's not what the D school students would respond to or need, is that being effective? So just those pieces.
Okay. Well, some of this will require us to do interviews with some of the schools, so we'll bring those back to you as quickly as we could get them. That's all right. That's what we do. But I think it's really a great conversation to be thinking about, and I think Mr. Davis brought up one of our schools that, I mean, I just couldn't be prouder to be associated with, to know that there are schools like Hope Academy. We went to visit recently, and just the work they're doing is truly, truly amazing, and so happy that people wanted to take that on. In fact, this morning in our leadership meeting, we were pulling out the A to F rules and looking to see why do we have to give a letter grade to that school. And I think it's a point of conversation that we need to have moving forward. And I'll just read to you the section that does eliminate some of our charter schools from letter grades, like Graduate Arkansas, Premier. For purpose of these rules only, the following entities shall be exempt from the designation of a school rating: an open enrollment public charter or conversion public charter whose mission and enrollment are primarily focused on students who have dropped out of high school or are identified as at risk of dropping out of school. So Hope Academy does not meet that definition, but there may be an opportunity to think about future rules to say, do we need to add something that does address these types of schools that are meeting the needs of kids, but a letter grade may not accurately represent the value that they're bringing to our students. So I think that's something, Ms. Wagner, put that on your list, that I think we'll want to talk about and consider when it comes time to revise the rules.
And so I'm glad you brought that point up, because I did put a question mark by Graduate Arkansas because they have an F. And so I was just trying to get a sense, because by what you just read, that makes sense to me. If we're working with students that traditionally are going to need a little bit more support and scaffolding to be able to be successful, what is that really F?
So actually, when the document was revised, that F was replaced with the NA,
Okay.
because it does not apply to them. So, but I think the point is exactly that. That's why that's in the rule, to not assign letter grades to some of our specialty schools.
I think I may have printed this before.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, I think those bring up the conversation back to what Mr. Davis was saying, is part of this is about the mission. Most of this is about the mission of the charter. And so that's something that I think we have to be very intentional as charter panel members when we're reviewing charters, new charters or renewals, that we have a really accurate understanding of the mission of the school, because everything really unfolds from there. Any other questions about open enrollment charters? Let me ask the panel, would it be helpful to you as we're going forward if we come back with we'll come back with working on some of these questions, that maybe we come back with some quick links to the ESSA School Index for all of these schools? Okay. We could start working on that, Ms. Summons, and go ahead and send that out to our panel members by email so that they'll have those, just a quick sheet. And then we'll put it on our probably January agenda to come back and review and see if there are additional questions and bring our additional data. As you looked at the district conversion sheet, anything that stood out to you? Just a reminder that we have 3 on here that would be up for renewal: Bauxite Minor Academy, Polk County Virtual Online in Mena, and Rogers New Technology. And we have received word from Rogers New Technology that they are going to go the School of Innovation route, so they will not be coming before us for renewal. They will be, I'm assuming, giving up their charter if they are, they're giving up their charter status to move to School of Innovation.
You said Bauxite Minor Academy, and then what was the next one?
Bauxite Minor Academy, Polk County Virtual Academy are the two that will be coming before us in December for renewal. Mhm. Oh, yes. Ms. Saraceni asked about visiting for renewals, and I would say yes. I would highly encourage you to make a visit. Let Ms. Summons know when you're going to be visiting so she can document that. I've already been to eSTEM, and we've been out visiting the premiers. We haven't been to all of them yet, but we've been out visiting those. I went to Scholar Made last year, so I'm looking forward to KIP and Friendship very soon, having a conversation with them and getting that planned out. And I've been thinking about doing some of the 2 district conversion virtually, since they're virtual schools. So I think that's another opportunity to think about how you might be getting to them in a timely manner.
So it's Friendship. So repeat the
Up for renewal,
open. Mhm.
KIP, eSTEM, Friendship Aspire, Premier High School of Arkansas, which is Little Rock, Texarkana, Fort Smith, and the Virtual Academy, Scholar Made, Bauxite Minor Academy, and Polk County Virtual. Mr. Davis, anything that you noticed about the district conversion?
No, nothing from me.
Ms. Wagner, I see you coming to give us
Yes.
advice.
Hi, I'm Miss Wagner with Desi Legal. I just wanted to remind everybody that if you do go for a visit, if more than one of you goes out to each school, to be sure to notify Miss Summons so she can send a FOIA notice, because that would be considered a meeting under FOIA, and we want to be as open and transparent as possible. So that's all.
Thank you. Ms. Newton, any other questions or thoughts? Ms. Newton, any other questions or thoughts?
I'm sorry, I was muted. No, thank you. I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Baldwin?
No.
Ms. Saraceni? Ms. Wright McMurray?
Just the similar comment that I made when we were looking at the other charts, is just the online charters seem to all either have B's or F's. And so just want to get a little bit more information about what's happening with those.
Okay. All right. Ms. Wagner, if you'll come back, this is on our action item to discuss. Do we need to make a motion or accept these reports or anything like that?
I don't believe you need to make a motion to accept the reports because you're bringing back more information, unless you do want to go ahead and accept the reports now, but you are getting more information on them. So if you want to wait until the January meeting to go ahead and accept the reports, I think that's fine as well.
Okay.
It's however the panel decides it wants to do it.
Panel, would you like to accept these reports now or come back in January with additional information?
So I do have a question.
Okay. Ms. Wright McMurray,
Sorry.
is your microphone on?
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So then once we get the reports back, then that's where we'll be able to talk as a panel and determine those that we want to come in person and give further explanation beyond that. So
Yes.
there's more movement beyond getting the reports back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's usually in the January, February, March time is the time when, you know, we're reviewing charters, bringing them back in, bringing in more data, having conversations like that. We try not to, you know, have 25 of them on one day.
No.
But to really get to the root of the issues and see what type of support needs to be put in place. And maybe the office can kind of group some that are similar to come together. Does that sound good?
Yes.
All right. So is the consensus that we will delay the final approval of the reports till the spring after we've heard the additional information? Yes, I'm seeing head nods and thumbs. All right, good deal. Then that's what we'll do.
Do we need to make a motion?
We'll bring all that back to you. Any other business? Ms. Wagner, any other business? Ms. Summons, any other business?
We have received all of our renewal applications. The dates for the renewals will be December 13th and 14th. So we are looking for you to be with us in person if you can, and those will be all-day meetings.
December 13th and 14th. And I did fail to mention at the beginning that we received a letter of resignation from Mr. Mark Zellner.
Yes.
For our charter panel. I think
Yes.
Ms. Summons, he'd taken a new job or something that wouldn't allow him to have time to
Yes,
meet with
ma'am.
us.
He's got other job duties and responsibilities, and so he sent us a letter of resignation.
He did such a great job. We were blessed to have him on here for the amount of time that he was with us. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments? Then I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Saraceni and a second from Ms. Wright McMurray to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned.